Hello, everybody. My name is Nicky Partridge. Welcome to Gallery Teachers Masterclass. Today, we are going to be talking about how to conduct an effective IELTS initial assessment. So, my name is Nicky Partridge. Here you have my details. I am a British person and I live and work in Cardiff, the capital of Wales. I am the owner of a language school called Partridge Languages, and I have been teaching English and I have been heavily involved in the IELTS examination and the assessment of IELTS for over 20 years. So what are we going to be looking at today? So today I will be providing a definition for what we understand by an initial assessment. And also I'll be explaining why the initial assessment phase is so important when you are setting your student or students on the correct language learning path. We'll also be looking at the components of an effective assessment. What makes up an effective assessment? How exactly should you conduct this crucial initial assessment? We'll consider the advantages and disadvantages of providing a full IELTS mock test at the initial assessment phase. And finally, I'll be concluding by providing some of my top tips, pro tips and considerations based on my many, many years of experience with English language teaching, assessment and the IELTS examination. But most importantly, I will be trying today to give you the tools and the techniques and therefore the confidence, which is really the key word here, to be able to carry out an effective initial IELTS assessment for your students or prospective students. So, what do we understand by assessment? And why is an accurate initial assessment so important? Let's start with a definition, the what. What exactly is an assessment? What do we mean when we say assessing students? I have a definition here taken from Irwin. Now, as an English language teacher, I am a big fan of identifying and highlighting keywords, which I've actually done here. So I would just like to give you a moment just so that you can read through this important definition. So what we are really talking about here is a process, okay? So an assessment is a process, and it's the process through which we are able to understand what is the best possible starting point to ensure that our students are on the right path to be able to maximize their learning and development. So you can see these keywords here, learning and development, twice in this definition. Okay, so the initial assessment really is that. It is understanding where the student is at right now to be able to plot and map the best possible course of studies for them. So why? Why is an effective initial assessment so important? Okay, and really the emphasis here should be on the word effective. Giving an assessment is not that difficult, but giving an effective assessment is really far more complicated. And what we're talking about here is managing expectations. So an effective initial assessment is essential for the production of an outcome-driven scheme of work that will deliver realistic success for the student, or to give the teacher the possibility to be able to propose a plan B based on evidence. Okay, so we will talk a little bit later in our presentation today about expectation setting and how to manage expectations. But really, the initial assessment is not only for the student. It's not simply for the student to know what their level is or whether they are a B1 or whether they're currently at level 6. It's just as important for the teacher, because if you do not have the correct information from the get-go, it's going to be almost impossible to plan the course, okay, or to assign the student to the correct course. And also, depending on the information that you are able to obtain and elicit from the assessment, you may need to propose a plan B, okay? So a student may come in with a specific idea of what they want to achieve or where they think they are at, but then it becomes the responsibility of the assessor or the assessment officer or the teacher to be able to quickly propose a different, slightly different course of studies depending on the outcomes of the assessment. From the student's point of view, the assessment is crucial because it is going to give them the answers to some very important questions that they will have regarding how much time and how much effort and possibly how much money they are going to be required to spend in order to reach their identified learning goals. If you are principally working with adults who come in needing IELTS exam for a very high stakes reason, they will certainly have a lot of questions around this: time, effort, and money, okay? And they will be expecting some answers. And while it can be very difficult to give concrete answers to these questions, and we will again talk a little bit about this during the pro tips section, you would be required to give them some general ideas of how much effort is required, how much time, and how much money from the assessment phase. So what are the components of an effective initial assessment? Okay, what is involved in giving an effective assessment? So first of all, we have to take into account that this is a holistic inference, okay? So we are looking for the whole picture. And this is very, very important. It's not simply a case of a student coming in, you give them a quick grammar test, or maybe even a section of the IELTS and say, okay, based on this, based on today, you are a 6. If you need a 7, you will need to do X, Y, Z. No, you will need to build up a much deeper picture of the student, okay, to be able to set them on the correct path, to be able to draw a conclusion based on evidence. So evidence would be what they actually produce during the assessment, both in terms of what they tell you, okay, what they say they want to achieve, what they may have already achieved, and also evidence in terms of what they are going to produce in a written format during the assessment, and then reasoning, okay? So you're going to use all your skills, all your know-how, all your knowledge to be able to build up this complete picture and draw a conclusion based on this evidence and reasoning, okay? So as I said, we're really looking to build a complete picture that really does go beyond simply understanding if they are a B1, a B1 plus, a C1, a 6, or a 7, okay? So what will you need? This is extremely important. What you will need as the assessor to be able to carry out an effective assessment. Okay, you will need these various ingredients. You'll need knowledge, cultural awareness, approachability, sensitivity, tact, a solutions-orientated outlook, and also to trust your gut feelings, okay? So, finally, you will also need to be prepared for a great deal of IELTS baggage. So what I have actually found over the years is that students who are interested in taking this IELTS exam, or they need to take this IELTS exam, will turn up with various different pieces of IELTS baggage. So this could be the fact that they have failed, or as they see it, failed the exam in the past, maybe once, twice, 3 times, maybe as many as 10 times, okay? So you're going to need to wrestle with them a little bit and wrestle with this baggage. They may feel very frustrated, maybe even a little bit angry towards this exam. They may have already spent a great deal of money on tuition, on classes, on exam fees, and they still haven't got to the point that they need to be able to move on to the next phase of their life or career. They may even have some horror stories. They might not be their own horror stories. They may be stories that they've heard from other people about just how difficult this exam is or how tricky it is, okay? Again, you will need to find a way to calm those nerves and to help them to overcome some of these feelings. On the other end of the scale, they could have a real false confidence, okay? They may come in and say, oh, I've heard I need to take an IELTS exam and I need to get 7 and I've already booked it and it's next month, okay? And I've had a look online and it doesn't look that difficult. So if you could give me a few classes, I think that that will be just fine for me, okay? So they may have this false confidence, and following on from your detailed initial assessment, you may actually need to rein that confidence in a little bit and explain to them with all of those elements that we've already seen, the tact, the sensitivity, that actually there's a little bit more involved to this than they may have appreciated. All right. So at this point, I'm going to say, time out, keep calm, and carry on, okay? Because you may be a newer teacher and you may have seen my list of ingredients, essential ingredients required for carrying out an effective assessment. And you may think, oh my word alive, I don't have the experience required to be able to really bring all of those elements into an effective initial IELTS assessment, okay? So we're going to unpick that a little bit in a moment, okay? And also to try to understand what you can do if you are a new or very new teacher to start you on the way towards the journey of being able to deliver an effective IELTS assessment. Okay, so help. I don't tick all these boxes, okay? So as I said, you may be new or relatively new teacher. You may certainly not be a senior teacher, or you may even be a senior teacher, but you still don't quite feel you could tick all of these boxes. So first of all, let's think about what I actually mean by these different elements, okay? So knowledge, what do we understand by knowledge? So what I'm really talking about here is your knowledge of frameworks for assessing students in general, okay? So learning English as a second language is an absolutely enormous field. There are many, many, many variables. Okay, it's almost impossible that one single student has exactly the same set of variables as another, because there are so many different things that are going to come into play here. However, knowledge in general of what are the main frameworks? Are we talking about the Common European Frame of Reference, so kind of B1, B2? Are we talking about the IELTS band descriptors? Okay, having a good detailed knowledge of exactly what is required of a student to move from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8, for example. And what are typical features of each of these levels, okay, in terms of grammar and lexis. So you would need to have that knowledge. Also of other exams. A person may well come to you and say, okay, I've got a first certificate and I need a 7 on IELTS. Where am I? Okay, so you'd need to have some kind of knowledge of how various different examinations match each other in terms of levels. Cultural awareness. So my next tick box here. So this is really another giant topic. And this really does come with some studies, but mainly a lot of experience. Okay, being able to almost profile to a certain extent a person who walks in through the door based on things like their educational background. Okay, did they finish school? Did they go to university? So we're not even thinking about English here. We're just thinking about their general aptitude for academia. All right. What kind of education system did they come from? Did they come from a country where things like critical thinking is very much a cornerstone of the curriculum? Or did they come from a system where memorization techniques are preferred? All right. How old are they? And what kind of early education might they have had in terms of English language? So, for example, if they are perhaps in their 30s or 40s, it's very likely that when they learned English at school, their teacher had perhaps limited English language knowledge themselves. So they probably didn't focus so much on communicative skills, but rather more on grammar and drilling. So you may be able to deduce, even before they put pen to paper, that they're probably going to have really good grammar if you give them a multiple choice grammar test, but they perhaps can't really hold a conversation. So this, again, all comes into cultural awareness. If they are already living in the UK, there's the possibility that perhaps their education came later. Maybe they didn't receive very much education at all in their home country. And after moving to the UK, they sort of rebooted their education. And finally, some sort of understanding of their L1, their first language. Do they speak a first language where the script is different? Okay, so if they are using a different script for writing, it's very likely that their speaking skills will be better than their written skills, simply because they've had to learn a new alphabet, which will impact on things like handwriting and spelling. Okay, so if we move on to approachability and sensitivity and tact, I would say these skills are somewhat linked. Okay, so if somebody is coming to you and you are asking them all of these questions about their background, about their previous studies, about their history with their English language learning, it's really important that you are friendly and approachable, okay, and that you have a lot of tact as well, especially if they are revealing things about themselves that maybe they're a little bit reluctant to tell you. You know, perhaps they maybe even didn't really learn to read and write as a child. They've learned that as an adult. That could certainly be the case. So these sorts of things require a lot of sensitivity in terms of the approach. Next, we have the solutions-orientated outlook. So whatever they tell you, you have to react positively, okay? You have to be able to present a clear path that is positive and that will engage them, all right? So absolutely, you must not throw your hands in the air and say, you need a 7? That's impossible. You'll never get 7 in a month, okay? Whatever path you're going to set them on, it has to have some solutions that are going to be achievable for that person who is sitting in front of you. And last but not least, and this is the one that probably comes with the real depth of experience, is that you need to trust your gut feelings, okay? I think many teachers have faced a scenario such as a student asking to go into a higher level class when the evidence that you are being presented with suggests that they're not that level. Okay, they're asking, they say, but I want to push myself. I want to go into a class that's more difficult, that's hard for me. This is where you really need to trust your gut feeling. You might get a gut feeling that that person, actually, you know what, based on everything that they've told me, they seem very determined, they seem very hardworking, they seem to have a lot of time that they can devote to self-study. You might take a small leap of faith and say, okay, I will enroll you into that slightly harder class, or a class that's slightly above your level at the moment. But you may also have the gut feeling that this person has a bit of false confidence, and really it's not in their best interests to do that, and not in the best interests of the other class members, in which case you really do need to trust your gut feelings. So if you are a new or relatively new teacher, or not yet a senior teacher, how do you get from this point of knowing that you need to be able to have all of these elements, but you don't quite have them yet? So there's lots of things that you can do. Like anything, it's important to just get started, okay? Even if you start small at the beginning or you're just doing certain elements of the assessment, the sooner you can get involved in assessing students and being an assessment officer, the sooner you will start to build up this bank of experience that you will need to be able to complete the full student profile, okay? So you could prepare your paperwork in advance. You can use a script, okay? So it's really important to have all of your documents in advance and prepared, so you're not doing anything on the hop. You can use pro formas, which is something that we do at my school. We have pro formas, which are in the student's personal learning file, where you're simply sort of going through a list of pre-decided questions, okay? You can prepare a range of written test types so that whoever comes through the door, whatever level they are at, whatever they tell you, you will have a written test ready for them at the right level, okay? You need to make sure that you are flexible at all points in the assessment process. So you don't go in with your blinkers on. You don't go in with a tunnel vision, okay? You go in with a completely open mind, because at any point during the assessment process, from the first moment to the last moment, there may be a sudden U-turn and you will need to change your mind about where you see this student's starting point. If you are a newer teacher, ask for training, okay? Ask to shadow an experienced assessment officer or senior teacher, okay? This is a fantastic way to, this observation, peer observation is a fantastic way to start to build up your skills. And then you can ask to be observed and for feedback. It's really important to always get feedback, either from senior teachers or from other assessment officers, or even from the people you are assessing, all right? You might not feel comfortable to do that straight away, but you might want to do it a little bit later on. So perhaps when they're halfway through their course, you could suggest to them that they give you a bit of feedback on how you managed them when they first walked into your school. And last but not least, it's very important that you reflect on the assessments that you have delivered. Could you have done something differently? Should you have done something differently? Okay. All right. So we've had a look into the various different things that you will need to be able to carry out an effective assessment. So let's look at the components. Okay. What is the student actually going to do when they walk into your school? The first thing you need to do is to have a conversation with structure. All right. So you will try to keep this remembering approachability, tact, sensitivity. Okay. So this should be quite light. It should be quite informal, because you want them to be at ease so that they give you accurate, true information. All right. The last thing you want is for people to actually lie to you, because that's not going to help you to build up this holistic picture that you're looking for. Obviously, this conversation is going to have structure. So this is where the pro formas come into play, maybe a script, maybe a list of predefined questions. Next, you should probably keep a scale like this handy. All right, it could be displayed on the wall as a poster in the assessment room. It could be on a piece of paper. It could be a PDF document on your computer. But keep something like this to hand, because it's really useful to be able to, well, for yourself, it's very hard to memorize all of the different exams and how they measure against each other, but also to show the students. So you can show them, right, okay, I think at the moment you are a B1. So this would be the equivalent of this on IELTS, or this as a Cambridge exam. All right. So keep something like this to hand. Obviously, depending on the types, typical exams that the school you're working at may usually teach against an IELTS scale. Okay. Next, so we've had the conversation, a structured conversation where you have elicited lots of information about the student's academic background, why they are with you, what they want to achieve, what their deadlines are, what they have done before, what kind of other qualifications they may have. The next thing you need to do is to include an appropriate timed written component. Okay. Personally, I'm not a fan of multiple choice grammar quizzes for IELTS. I don't think they serve a great deal of purpose because, first of all, multiple choice, there is always the possibility that they could have just guessed. And secondly, because really we want to see the productive skills, okay, of the person to be able to build up this true picture. You should be able to infer from their spoken language and from their written language how their grammar and lexis is. In fact, this is one of the key elements of the IELTS. There is no grammar test, okay, but there are grammar and lexis sections in both the speaking and the writing in the band descriptors, as we have seen in my previous workshops. But there is no grammar test. So in terms of IELTS, it's not that useful really to give a multiple choice grammar test. So what do I mean by a written component? Okay, so it depends what they tell you. If they come in and you see that their level is a little bit lower, so I'm talking about maybe 5.5 and below, and they don't have any experience of IELTS, you're not going to give them an IELTS writing test because you will probably scare the living daylights out of them and they may well run away horrified by the experience and never come back, which is absolutely the last thing you want to do, because your job is to instill confidence in them to start this important journey. Okay. So give them something that they can achieve, give them something that they can do, which is going to allow you to see their grammar level and their lexical range. What is this? It could be a short story, it could be an email to a friend, it could be a mini essay, all right, but not necessarily an IELTS task 2. Put a word count on it and also put a time limit on it, okay? So they could do a gap fill exercise focused on signpost words or linking expressions. Okay, so signposting and linking or other kind of IELTS specific targeted vocabulary as a sort of a gap fill could be also a component, especially if they don't have a lot of time to do during the actual assessment. So again, this will depend school to school. We usually allow about an hour for an IELTS assessment. So that would be about 15 minutes for the chat, the structured conversation, maybe about 30 minutes to carry out a piece of written work. And then a sort of a concluding section where you present them with your conclusions and you tell them, this is the course of studies for you based on my recommendations. Okay. So if you don't have that much time, you may decide to give them a gap fill exercise, okay, with linking expressions. Or lastly, you could give them an adapted IELTS writing task 1 or task 2. So let's imagine a scenario where a person comes in and they've done the IELTS exam a few times before, and they say, look, I'm fine with task 2. I'm fine with listening. I think I'm okay with reading. Here's my scores. Here's my score sheet. This is what I got in my last test. But task 1 is my Achilles heel. Task 1 is my nemesis. I have no idea what I'm doing. In this case, you could give them an adapted IELTS task 1, for example, because what you really need to do is see. You need to see where they could be going wrong. Okay. So you would have a few of these adapted IELTS task 1s and task 2s up your sleeve. So if we consider a scenario where you have a person who really has done the test a number of times, maybe they are getting all sorts of different results every time, sometimes a 7 for the speaking, sometimes a 6 for the reading, and up and down and up and down. You may consider giving them an IELTS mock test. Okay, so this would definitely require a very experienced senior teacher or an academic manager, so somebody with an in-depth knowledge, okay, of the IELTS exam, who can sort of effectively give them a predicted grade based on the public band descriptors. There's a few advantages to this. So the first main advantage is that you get an accurate picture. So you're seeing all the skills. You could even do a simulated speaking test. Okay, you really are getting the closest that you possibly could to the real exams. There's no interpretation, okay? So there's no chance for them to say, oh, well, you know, on that day I had a bad head, or I couldn't hear the listening very well, or I didn't like the topic, or all of these different sort of, let's say, excuses that people use as to why they may have got a certain grade. Okay, so you've set the conditions. There's no interpretation. So it shines a very clear light on the strengths and weaknesses, and this will help you to form a very clear study roadmap. You may say, well, look, no problems with the reading. So if you're coming in for private classes, we can almost ignore, not completely ignore, but we can put that to the side for the moment. And we just need to focus on your listening, because this is clearly your weak point. Okay. Or even more specific than that, you could say, hey, you just don't write in paragraphs. Okay. So we need to look at your, basically how you structure your essay, paragraphing skills. Okay. If we can sort that out, maybe 2 or 3 lessons, boom, you should be good to go with your next IELTS, okay? So it's going to give you the possibility to really do that deep dive. However, there are a number of disadvantages to doing a complete mock test. From the point of view of the school, it's really time and resource consuming, okay? So this can take anything up to 4 hours to do. If you're really going to do it like a real IELTS exam. So you're going to need resources, you're going to need a teacher, you're going to need a classroom. Okay, you're probably going to have to charge the prospective student for doing it. You will need a very experienced member of staff. It can be quite stressful for the student. Okay, we run a number of mock tests here at my school every week, and the students become very stressed about them. Because it's an exam, basically, and their own teachers are going to see where they are at, and they find that quite stressful. And it can be demoralizing, all right? And it is never really possible to fully simulate the real exam, okay? So it could be unnecessarily stressful or demoralizing, okay? And this is a key warning from my experience. I always strongly discourage students from using the real IELTS exam as an assessment tool, okay? The real IELTS exam is not an assessment tool. You should only really be encouraging students to take it when they are ready. Very often there's this idea that they will use the exam to try. I want to try it, okay? If they really want to try it, get them to try it in a paid mock test scenario in your school, not in the real exam. Because the exam is stressful. It's really, really stressful for the student. And if they do very badly in the exam, it can really put them off wanting to do that exam again. And people can get into a really negative mindset towards the exam itself if they keep taking it, spending hundreds of pounds or dollars or euros, and then they have to take it again. They spend that money again and again. And in my experience, people who take the exam over and over and over again, they only ever go in one direction, which is downwards, okay? So really, the exam is not the solution. You need to be treating the problems, okay? So why are they not getting those grades? So you've carried out your assessment. So you have, you've been able to tick those boxes. You've got the knowledge, you've got the sensitivity, you've got the gut feelings. You've watched senior teachers doing them. You've carried it out. You've had the conversation with structure. You've given them the written components. Okay. You've checked it all. Now you have to present your conclusions back to the student and your recommendations honestly, sympathetically, and in a collaborative format, okay? So honesty really is the best policy. There is no point in sugarcoating things for a prospective IELTS student because they will not get that sugarcoating in the real exam, okay? You need to be sympathetic because, as we've already mentioned, this is a very high stakes exam. People's whole future career, life path can really depend on them getting that, for example, 6 or 7. And if you see that they are a million miles away from that, or you see that they perhaps don't have the financial resources or the time resources to be able to get them to that point, you have to be honest, but very sympathetic, okay? Present your findings in a collaborative format. So perhaps in an online document that you actually share with them. You show them your conclusions, okay? You show them the answers that they have given you to your questions. You show them their results. You show them where they went wrong. And you show them the conclusion that you have made. Don't keep it hidden in a secret little notebook, okay, so that they feel like it's something secretive going on, okay? Show them, be very upfront. And then offer them a clear study path, okay, that you can be open to some negotiation, okay? So it's really important at this stage that you come to them and say, look, I know you need to get here. To get here, you will need to do this, 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 and this, okay? And it's going to take this amount of time. I think in general, probably will take this amount of money. And if you do these things, then you should be able to reach your goal. And don't be afraid to consult with a colleague or a senior teacher. I still consult with my colleagues, my senior teachers, my academic managers all the time, daily, when I have online assessments or face-to-face assessments, or sometimes even, during the milestones of the course, because really you do need as much input as possible. So don't be afraid to do that. Nobody has all of the answers. Okay. So last but certainly not least, my pro tips. Okay, so conducting an effective initial IELTS assessment. That has been the topic of today. So wherever possible, insist on students taking a written assessment component face-to-face, okay? Do not let them take it home, all right? Even if time is limited, try to find a way of getting them to produce a written component actually at your school or at your teaching facility. If they take it home, there's no guarantee that they will have done it honestly or under the types of conditions that you would ideally like. If the lessons are online, then you need to establish some clear ground rules and remind students very bluntly that if they cheat in any kind of way, this will result in an inaccurate start point and it will affect their whole journey. Okay, so it's very important that even if it's online, obviously you cannot stand over them while they do the written component. You could try to do it live, for example, through a Google document or something like that. There are some possibilities to do it synchronously. But if not, just remind them that cheating is not really going to do them any favors. I've already mentioned this. Be transparent, share all your notes, your grades, your recommendations with them via a shared platform. Okay, so this could be a paper learning file if you're a little bit old school that actually lives in your office that they can access at any time, along with your student curriculum or your IELTS curriculum, etc. Or it could be some sort of online shared drive, okay, that again they can access and they can see for themselves. After the initial assessment, it's important that you do have regular goals, review points, touch points to allow the students to measure their own progress. So they have this autonomy, they have this input. It's not just completely top down, okay? They have some say in their own destiny. And then you must adjust your study plan for them accordingly, okay? Be very clear that you cannot guarantee grades or progress and set clear boundaries. So it's extremely important that you do not say things like, you will get a 7. I promise you I can get you an 8, okay? It's in my opinion, quite irresponsible to do that. There are far too many variables. You could be the best teacher in the world. You could have donkey's years of IELTS experience, but what happens if on the day the student doesn't feel very well? Okay, There are so many things, extra things that come into play, that it is not possible, it is irresponsible to guarantee grades, okay? And make sure you set clear boundaries around things like homework, how much homework you're willing to mark, how much homework you expect the students to do, okay? And then finally, when you are expressing your expectations and you're presenting them with your conclusions, make sure you use language like "I would hope," or "in general terms," or "typically. If you do this, you will likely achieve this," because again, in my years of experience, fundamentally, the things people want to know when they come out of an assessment for IELTS is, how long is it going to take me to get IELTS and how much is it going to cost me? Okay. And it is very, very important that, first of all, you don't guarantee them any kind of concrete success. You say, well, I hope, based on my knowledge, based on my experience and working with you, with your hard work, I would hope you would be able to get this if you do this by this time. And in general terms, it takes a student studying full-time X number of months to improve to this level. But it's all very, very general, because you are not responsible for that student's study habits outside of your classroom, okay? And remember, as I've mentioned, there are so many variables when a student walks in through your door that it is impossible to guarantee success. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you have enjoyed this session all about how to conduct an effective IELTS initial assessment. There are many more useful ELT resources on the Gallery Teachers website, so I highly recommend that you take a look at that. So the short answer is yes, there is a difference in the sense that if you are carrying out an initial assessment for a prospective IELTS student, then you will be asking more questions related to their experience of IELTS when you have your structured conversation. And also in the written component, depending on where they are at, you may choose to give them an adapted IELTS Task 1 or Task 2 writing test. So the benefits of the initial assessment for the IELTS student are basically all around having the expectation of the student managed from the very first point that they make contact with you as the teacher or with the school where you are working. It's really important for a student to understand very clearly where they are on their learning path, what their start point is, to be able to effectively gauge where they need to go. So having this expectation managed from day one is very important. So finally, if we think about how many years a person should be teaching IELTS before carrying out an IELTS assessment, this is a little bit like the question of how long is a piece of string, because really it depends on many other factors, such as that teacher's general knowledge of teaching English as a second language, the various different measuring frameworks, and also on the personality of the teacher. If they are also approachable, we hope that all teachers are approachable, if they have the appropriate levels of sensitivity, tact, to be able to manage the expectations of the student when they come in for the assessment. But as a general rule, I would suggest that a teacher should be teaching for a number of years before carrying out an IELTS assessment alone. But in a more collaborative sense, perhaps in a peer setting, that could start much sooner, if not straight away, when a person starts teaching IELTS.